Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, friends, supporters, stakeholders. Yeah, welcome to the last show of the year, the Bridging Cultures. I'm so delighted today that we're gonna talk about one of the biggest cultures in the world, certainly in Africa, Nigeria from West Africa. Many of us have one way or another relationship with Nigeria. This is Commercial Radio Worldwide, the mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. Our shows are based on the principle that we call the idea. We inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. That's the idea. Wow, a reunion indeed. I'm having a special friend of mine, former colleague, brother from Lagos, Steve Oboh. Steve is my former colleague at Motorola, and like myself, we ventured into becoming consultants in the human capital space. And as always, we joined by our friend, the friend of the world, Dean Foster from New York. Dean, you are a friend of the world indeed. Am I right? Welcome.
Well, I hope so. I'd like to think that that might be the case. I have lots of friends in lots of places around the world. You know, I have worked in over 100 countries around the world. So I've met some wonderful, wonderful people. And I like to say that my home base is New York City, but my home, I don't know. I think my home is everywhere. Everywhere I have a friend is my home.
Yes. But right now you are in a very cold New York.
It's very cold. Yes, it is. Winter has come. Yes, it has.
Steve, my friend, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Always glad to connect with you.
Indeed, my brother. How is Lagos? Oh, Lagos.
Well,
Somebody cautioned me and say it's not Lagos, it's Lagos.
where is Lagos? Maybe because you pronouncing it the way the Portuguese must have pronounced it, but we had to Nigerianize it to become Lagos.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let me up front acknowledge, you can tell my voice is losing me. I don't know where it comes from. All of a sudden, my voice is gone, but it's not going to intimidate me. I'm going to enjoy this conversation. But I want up front to acknowledge our quiz respondents, the friends and members and the listeners, regulars, Luisa Muhuli, Sylvia Mamorare, Tosin Pandle, Lebogang Sachwa, Franz Ramutla, Mai Mutuwats. Those names are very, very familiar because they've been here before. But today they are listening on the public listening platform. And then they're going to be joining us in the second hour as our quiz respondents.
Fantastic. I apologize up front right now if I mispronounce any of the names because I have not been as familiar with these individuals as you are. So my apologies if I don't pronounce your names correctly, but I'm delighted to meet you all, and I hope we become good friends by the end of our quiz today.
Beautiful. Having started with the Arabian cultures, and then followed that with Chinese culture, and last time with the South Korean culture. We're back to the mother continent, Nigeria, for that matter, West Africa, Dean.
And it's so appropriate to be there. I would have thought that perhaps we might have started with Nigerian culture, but I think there was so much interest at the time with when we looked at Gulf Arabian culture that we decided that there was an important moment that we needed to discuss that culture. But I'm glad now that we're finally back, as you say, in the mother continent and talking about Nigeria, because it's such an important culture in the world and such an important culture in respect to South Africa. So let's get started.
Yeah, perhaps we we start by welcoming our friend once again, Steve Oboh. As I indicated, Steve Oboh and I, we worked for Motorola together. And actually, Steve, if I may say this, you actually started Motorola office in Nigeria. Maybe just tell us how did that come about, and then who are you, and where did you grow up in Nigeria, and what are you doing today?
Okay. Like you said, my name is Steve Oboh. Although my mother calls me Steven, and she happens to be the only one that does that. So I have been in Nigeria all of my life, except for the period I went to United States for my first degree and my second degree. And I came back home almost immediately. I started working, coming back home. It's been a very interesting journey. Growing up, it was always and has always been so nice being in Nigeria until lately. We weren't encumbered. Nigeria is one of the countries in Africa that did not have to pick up arms to be able to get independence. We sat on a table and negotiated our independence. And two, our colonialism was only 46 years period, from 1914 to 1960. So we literally grew up ourselves. And just when we're trying to get to know each other more on being on our own, then there was a coup. Since then, things have changed a lot. But like I said, for myself, I worked briefly as a bank clerk before I left for the US. Since coming back, I work for one of the biggest conglomerates in Nigeria, SCOA, as a management trainee, playing different roles. And when I left them, I tried to do something for myself. Then I got a call from my wife in Lagos. I was in Port Harcourt, telling me that I was being sought after for a job, and then asked me to call an old colleague of mine. When I did, he told me that a consultant for his company based in South Africa had called him seeking someone for the human resource position for Motorola. And they're going to open an office in Nigeria. So I said, okay, especially coming from my wife, because now she's happy that I'm going to come back to Lagos. So I called the South African office and had a chat. And then they now said, okay, can you come out to South Africa? We're going to send you a ticket so you can come have a chat with us. So that we can conclude. I said, that's right. So I went to, they sent the necessary documents. I went to the South African embassy and they got my visas. And then I traveled out to South Africa and I got engaged. So I came back and started working from home. Motorola didn't have facilities in Nigeria. So I was going to
Working
build up
from
the
your
office
own,
from day
working
one.
from your own home.
Yeah. So, but they had some engineering personnel on ground in Nigeria. So I went to meet them in the hotel, got introduced, and offered them whatever support they needed. And then about a month afterwards, I met some other senior salespersons of Motorola. One of them was a Nigerian, and with his boss, who is a female and from the US. And I got introduced to them. We had dinner, and then they told me their plans. And then we took a room at a hotel to use as office. So for about 1 year, we were using room 100 in a hotel as our office.
Yeah.
While they were running bids in order to get a deal. Then I was also assisting them running to Dubai to collect documents, overnight flights. And I started on being HR because my first degree was in marketing. And in my previous experience working for the conglomerate, I was also in marketing roles and sales roles, aside of finally ending up in HR. So I had all of this background and also managed the warehouse. So I had logistics experience. This is all I brought into my role in Motorola. So I was supporting when we finally got a deal, and we had 60 expatriates fly into the country all at once. And I was the only support person on ground. So I was playing finance support, marketing support, administrative support, security support. So until we finally got an office, and then we started bringing in, engaging various individuals who started taking up some of these roles away from me. So, but at the point in time, I was all. Funds were being remitted to my account, personal account, to run the office on behalf of Motorola. The drawback I had was the internet services in Nigeria were just at a foundation stage.
That's going to be a problem, right?
So while my colleagues in the US, in Germany, in the UK, even South African office, their expectations was that whatever was forwarded to me, I got to be able to get it done and get it back to them instantly. But then you send documents, it takes me 6 hours to download the document. I have to download for 10 minutes. But the good part of it, because of my exposure, having lived in the US and my previous work experience, I was not intimidated by the volume of work and also dealing with the expatriates. So they were very comfortable with me. And we had a very, a huge club, because, the Arabs weren't relating with Israelis. And the technical activities in Nigeria was given to the Israeli office. And a lot of, so we had these Israelis in the office, then we had the Arabs in the office. We all have to be able to put in a balance and let everyone know Motorola comes first. So whatever it is you are having outside Nigeria, that's outside Nigeria.
Sure. So you have expatriates from all over the world, and then you have Nigerians who themselves are also quite very different depending on where they're coming from in the country, right?
Yeah, Nigeria is a unique country. I don't know if there's any country like Nigeria.
Mm.
We have more than 250 ethnic groups.
Mm.
Yeah, but the government like to recognize about 11 major tribal groups. But then the reality is that we are more than 250 ethnic groups.
Mm.
And each group has something unique to them.
Mm.
Their value system, their marital system, the way they relate to the public, the way they relate among themselves. So the degree of timidity,
Mm.
exposure, and all of this get mixed together.
Mm.
So for the Nigerian, the tribe comes first before the country.
Mm.
So where I'm usually impressed when I see in my visits to Zambia, Malawi, Madagascar, South Africa, people talking about Nigerian movies,
Mm.
and they think that is how Nigerians behave.
Yeah.
And I used to tell them, no, if you are watching an Igbo movie, you are looking at Igbo culture.
Yeah.
That is not mine.
Mm.
If you are looking at one from Kano, which they call Kannywood, what they are portraying to you is the Muslim Hausa Fulani culture.
Mm.
If you are watching a Yoruba program, that's also what I see in a Yoruba program, not a Nigerian program.
Mm.
So, but how does this now play out in the workplace?
Mm.
That is where the management in the workplace become very, very dicey. You have to be firm. You have to ensure that the company culture is clearly adhered with. But then I also then have to bring on board, repeat the onboarding program that may have been done for expatriates in their country when they got employed to Motorola.
Mm.
I have to repeat the same process when they come to work in Nigeria so that they understand who we are and how we relate. Because you might be related with a Nigerian, for example, who is coming to Lagos for the first time from his own cultural his own tribal part of the country, and is not exposed to a whole lot of stuff.
Mm.
One thing I used to tell expatriates, one, Nigerians don't get intimidated by an expatriate.
Mm.
But the first instance is to show you regard,
Mm.
be accommodative, and be nice to you. But if in any way you try to show and remind them that you are an expatriate, then they will let you know who they really are. So when you interview a Nigerian, which is not coming from our culture, don't expect the Nigerian to have an eyeball to eyeball contact with you all through. Because we are raised from childhood that eyeball to eyeball with somebody superior to you or an elder is disrespect.
Mm.
So I wouldn't end up you using that to evaluate a candidate and say it's like they are having something to hide, like they would say in the US. Two, every time you spoke to a Nigerian, you must show him that you respect him as a human being. Because many Nigerians are not used to black and white issues.
Yeah.
So they are not exposed to that. So they see you, they just see you like any other reverend father or somebody else, expatriate that has come from Europe and lived among them for a long time. Then, like we were going to have a dinner sometime. One of my colleagues from Turkey, he took up one of the dishes and put it close to his nose to smell the aroma. Then I told him he should not do that again.
Mm.
That in Africa, especially Nigeria, it is not expected I should smell the food you want to eat. You can enjoy the aroma from a distance, but don't put it close to your nose. Because they will refuse to eat the food.
Mm.
So you needed to make sure that these little peculiarities is passed to the expatriate colleagues. But in Nigeria, we learn over a period to understand where each other is coming from.
Mm.
Our value systems are different. The way a particular tribe looks at the issue of money. I'll give you an example. For example, our Igbo brothers, it's all about money.
Mm.
But some other tribes are laid back. Like the Hausas, they are laid back, but they have been traders over centuries with the North Africans.
Mm.
But they are laid back. And they are greatly influenced by Islam. So, but they are mixing their local culture with Islamic culture. And most of the Southerners are getting used to Islamic culture for the first time. So when you work in the same office, many Southerners are getting to see. They are not. They are used to seeing ladies in the office, but it wasn't always like that in the North. And when the Northerners come, they have to wrap up the Muslim way. You have to be able to accommodate for that. You have to be able to teach and coach the non-Muslim to know how to relate with the Muslim ladies. Unlike the way they will relate with ladies from their own culture, where things are very open and direct. And also, courtesy. Irrespective of where you come from, Nigeria, you are expected to show some courtesy to persons in authority or someone who is older than you. I recall when Motorola tried to introduce a first name, we never could really implement it because you don't call your elder or someone in higher authority, you don't call them by first name. Now, but the Motorola culture is that you call by first name. So we try to do that, but then they will still find a way not to do it. If they want to address me, they can say Mr. Steve. Or they say Oga Steve, which is the same thing as someone in high authority or older. So you have to accommodate some of those things that are local that you cannot change, as long as it's not disruptive.
Beautiful, beautiful. Hold it there, Steve. We're gonna come back. This is really getting into it in a very nice way. Dean, you engage with Nigerian culture from a professional business point of view and from a research point of view. What stand out from what Steve has just shared with us now?
Yeah, Steve said so many important things. Thank you, Steve, for all of that insight. You know, much of the work that we have done and my company has done over the years has been to help expatriates prepare for life and work in their new country. So we, and in fact, had done quite a bit of work with Motorola for many years, helping their expatriates before they relocate to another country, and to give them information about the country so that they could understand the people better, and so that they could work and live more successfully and more easily in their new country. And that has been the work that we've done around the world for many, many years. And of course, Nigeria included, because when many companies send their expatriates to Africa, Nigeria is the place they send them. As well as, of course, South Africa and other places. But Nigeria certainly is one of the major economies in the world, and certainly in Africa. So we did quite a bit of work there. And Steve is exactly correct in the important things that expatriates who are coming to work in Nigeria need to remember. Many of those things can be very challenging, particularly for Europeans, for North Americans, and for, I would even say, East Asians and even Gulf Arabia, because we see differences. Steve's example, for example, of not making eye contact while speaking with someone, to show respect for the hierarchy, is something that often is very challenging for people from North America or Europe or East Asia, because here you need to show respect by making eye contact. And this is, of course, not the same thing. They have to recognize that you show respect. You don't want to make eye contact with someone who is more senior than yourself, and that would actually be disrespectful to do that. So sometimes it's those little things that are easy to understand and easy to fix, but you have to know them. You have to be told about that ahead of time, and if you're not, you can easily make those kinds of mistakes. I also liked very much, Steve, your comments about the various ethnic groups in Nigeria because, again, many people who have not been to Nigeria think of Nigeria as one country. And of course, politically, it is one nation. But culturally, the individual you will be working with can be very, very different depending on their ethnic group, their association. In general, we speak about four different major ethnic groups. There are the Hausa people in the north, and then of course the Fulani, and both of these groups are heavily influenced, as Steve said, by Islamic traditions. Then of course there is the great Yoruba tribe, coming from the original civilization going back many centuries, the Oyo civilization, more in the southwest, and of course Igbo, more in the southeast. And each of these four major groups, of course, then break down into many other smaller ethnic groups. And individuals, you will be working with individuals who combine behaviors and values and beliefs that are more like one group than the other. Now, when we all work together in one company, these differences can become problems if we don't understand them, recognize them, and also manage them successfully. But I like to say whenever we have to deal with differences, whether these differences are within one country or whether they are between countries, differences also give us wonderful opportunities to learn new ways of thinking and new ways of behaving, and very likely also give us opportunities to think about new solutions to old problems. Maybe your way of doing something is more successful. Maybe it contains some way of overcoming a problem that I've not been able to do. And so whenever we work with someone who thinks a little differently, who behaves a little differently from ourselves, yes, it can be difficult. Yes, maybe if you don't understand it, you can feel left out. You can feel like these people think differently and maybe are wrong or don't understand me. But also you can think maybe they have a way of thinking that could be helpful. Maybe there's something I can learn from this. And of course, the first step is always to recognize these differences, understand them, be told about them. And you don't have to agree and you don't have to value them, but you do have to respect them. And maybe there's also an opportunity even to learn. And so I think one of the strengths of Nigeria, and whenever Nigeria succeeds, it succeeds because it does have these differences. And this is a great strength. It's not a problem. It doesn't diminish Nigeria. It makes it stronger because all of these people can learn from each other and become even more successful at working with each other.
So Dean and Steve, am I right to say that based on what you have shared with us, that there is no one national Nigerian culture?
No, there's not one unique Nigerian culture that it's like if you met an American outside of America, you will to a large extent grasp how Americans are, how they behave. But in Nigeria is different. Even if I'm going to eat on the same table or in the same room with someone from another tribe, we are eating the same meal. We might eat it different way.
That's right. And that difference, in fact, Steve, you talk about dining differences. Of course, that difference would be very noticeable because of between, let's say, Hausa and Yoruba, because Hausa has been so influenced by Islamic traditions. So eating with women at the table might take it would take a different style. Some of the dishes would be eaten differently, and some of the food would be even different. So you're absolutely right about that.
And now, this effort by non-Nigerians like ourselves wanting to actually commonize everybody out of Nigeria. And as Steve mentioned that sometimes you watch these movies from, is it Bollywood today? What did you call it? Is it Nollywood or it's Nollywood, right?
Well, that also tells you the differences. The ones coming out of Kano, they call Kannywood.
Uh-huh.
But the ones coming out from the south, which is the one that is spread across Africa a lot, that's Nollywood.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. So you can still see some difference, just trying to create something unique for themselves by calling it Kannywood.
Mm. Mm.
Sam and Steve, I have a question for Steve. Steve, you've had a lot of experience helping non-Nigerians to understand these differences. And from your experience, when you've worked with people from North America, let's say U.S. Americans, or people from Europe, or even Gulf Arabia, do these differences become problems for these individuals, or do you emphasize one united way of working in Nigeria?
I emphasize one united way, especially the adherence to Motorola work policies and office culture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Motorola has a global work culture that is very flexible and accommodative, and is not uh, uh, tuned towards local behavior. It's more
Right.
of a global behavior. When you walk into that door, you are no longer in your country, you are in Motorola. So the way you behave in Chicago office is exactly the way I expect you to behave in the Nigerian office.
Now, do
But go
people have?
ahead.
I'm sorry. People have to learn what that is because they don't automatically know that.
Well, good enough. We the majority were always Motorola's posted to Nigeria, but then we also had third party employees that come in that are non Motorolans.
Right.
But we make effort immediately to make sure that they get to know. This is where the onboarding activities to get them to know this is the Motorola way. So we don't have any room here for you to bring your cultural whatever it is in your country into this office. But let me tell you some problem, still going back to the Israeli Arab relationship.
Yeah.
Now, the Israelis are very finicky about many things. So, what they eat and what they don't eat. So, when we want to do team building, we want to go out to the beach to spend a day in the beach for fun games. There, you notice they don't want to come to the beach. Then I inquire, or they say because the food we're cooking is not within their cultural way of cooking. I said, okay, but since other people are not complaining, why don't you bring your cook? I'll give you the money. You go ask your cook to go buy the things, and then he will accompany us to the beach and do the cooking for everybody. So they agreed to come. Then they wouldn't stay in the same hostel with the rest of the people. They want to stay in an Israeli secured compound, even if that compound is owned by a vendor. But they'll tell you it's because of their security. So there are few things like this here and there you have to accommodate, as long as the global office is okay with it. But from local to expatriates, the first line of relationship is to make sure that expatriates relate positively with the locals without any air of superiority.
Right.
Because that's where the friction normally comes in. If you see your colleague in the office as a colleague, then there will be no friction.
Right.
So,
part of the problem, Steve, that we have with global organizations like Motorola and major multinationals is that with expats, they are often coming into the country, in this case, Nigeria. They're also often coming into the country from the headquarters, from the world capital, let's say. In the case of Motorola, that would be Chicago. And so they come with a mentality of, well, I'm coming from headquarters, so I know everything that the way things should be done, which is often not very successful and not a good mentality, because it doesn't allow for the experience and the expertise of the people in the country who know how things work in Nigeria. And so immediately it creates this friction that you talk about. And we've learned over the years it's very important when we're working with expatriates to remind them and to impress upon them that local expertise is the source of success when working in another country. And you must first show respect for and knowledge of that local expertise in order to in order to continue that, in order to have smooth working relationships, in order for people to feel comfortable with what you say about headquarters. And I've found that whenever we remind expatriates of the importance of this, they're always surprised. They didn't realize that they can be perceived as imposing what headquarters wants without expressing respect for the success and the expertise of the way things have been done in the country. So this is a very important point, and I'm glad that you raised that. The respect for your colleagues and for how things are done in country. And if you don't understand what that is, then you must take the time to learn that.
I will give Motorola a lot of credit for the work culture, and which made sure that much of that wasn't a big deal, and good enough for us too. The expatriates from the US were not much because we operated under the Middle East and Africa and Europe, So a lot of expatriates came in from Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It wasn't much issue from the South African angle because there are a lot of African ways already used to.
Yeah.
But some of the problems you usually have are not really from the big Western countries. They are from smaller countries. So some people coming from Indonesia, most of the third party expatriates come from India, Indonesia, Eastern Europe. These are the people who sometimes cause friction because they too have never been out of their country and they still wanted to behave like they were in their own country.
That's right.
But
So,
will you say, Steve, that you've been, when you reflect now, successful in positioning the Nigerian perspective from culture point of view in those expatriates that spent good time in Nigeria? Did they walk back having learned things that you say today they will still appreciate?
yeah, I think they would because many of them came, with false information and impression, thinking that Nigeria was not going to be fun. That Nigeria is in Africa, they are not exposed, they might not know much, but on arrival, they are surprised on the level of economic development. And then they are mostly resident in Victoria Island, which is the highbrow area, and they are accommodated in highbrow accommodation. And then in a little while, they get to find out home country connections and getting together with folks from their country. So they begin to really enjoy Nigeria. And they also find that in the office, they are mixing with a lot of bright Nigerians. So in a little while, whatever it is that they are trying to pass across is easily adopted. And, for example, we started at 60. In less than 2 years, we now had less than 15 expatriates because all the jobs have been taken over by Nigerians who understudied those expatriates. So it became less expensive for the organization, for Motorola. But my other problem was the danger of the expatriates feeling too comfortable and taking unnecessary risk. They're not supposed to drive. They want to drive. They go out to party all night on the weekends. So all of the basic security precautions, they know they are gotten so comfortable with the environment, they think that they will be okay. But glad enough, we didn't have any major issue all through the period.
So, Steve, if somebody is planning to do business with Nigerians, based on what you have shared with us, and then I think probably you did that a number of times because there've always been business companies, organizations come over there to do business with Motorola. So what are the top 5 things will you say that they need to be cognizant of that are very culturally impacted?
Well, I'll say first of all, don't assume that in any way you are superior to a Nigerian.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will come across Nigerians who have been wherever you have been.
So that's superiority in terms of self-perception, not necessarily in terms of perception.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2, I want to say that Nigeria is a country whereby you have both the good and the bad.
Mm.
So some of the assumptions of governance issues, the level of trustworthiness,
Mm.
you will find the good and you will find the bad. So certain assumptions in your home country on transactional assumptions, you always have to take one step back and be sure that it's going to be okay.
Mm.
So, because whatever is going on out there in the world, you have part of it going on in Nigeria.
Mm. Because Nigerians are well traveled.
They are well traveled. They are well exposed to whatever is going on in the world. So, and also, there's also this assumption that, I will just work with global companies like KPMG or PwC. Those are the only folks that I can have confidence in. Yes, they are global, but they may not be as down to earth as I am.
Mm.
Because I have lived global, I have worked global, and I've worked local and live local. So I recall some of the, I remember when Motorola said, we want to have a transparent payroll activities. I work with the security manager to raise a memo and say, no, we are not yet mature for that.
Mm.
So
transparent meaning that it's okay for people to know the levels and how much each level is entailed.
Yes, but in Nigeria, we are not yet mature for that.
That was then, right?
We are still not.
Mm.
That's why you hardly find job openings advert in Nigeria. They don't put the salary scale.
Mm.
It's not it's not common to have that done.
Mm.
Because you don't want the different grades to know what other people are making.
Mm.
So
this is quite so Steve.
Yeah.
You worked and we worked together at that level. We were reporting into Dubai, and then when you get into the Dubai office, if I can recollect, a number of times we misunderstood you because you will position Nigeria the way you are positioning, and a number of times you will find yourself literally defending Nigeria. And how did you feel when you were put in such situation, in such a dilemma?
Well, I never felt uncomfortable because as long as one, I'm speaking with integrity.
Mm.
I'm not saying something you go behind and you find something different. And I have to be very realistic and open so that managers, senior managers making decisions have the right information to make decisions. I'm not going to paint Nigeria positively when it's negative, but I will not also accept Nigeria being painted negative when it's supposed to be positive.
Mm. Do you think Nigeria is the most misunderstood country and culture from having traveled the world over?
Well, I don't know much of people's feelings toward South Americans
Mm.
because South Americans don't much play in the environment of Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Mm.
But as far as within the areas in which we relate, including North America, yes, I think we are greatly misunderstood. But then, whoever wants to do business in Nigeria, whoever wants to come to Nigeria, should take time because you run into some Nigerians in the US, for example, and you want to talk about Nigeria, and they never want to talk about the negative.
Mm.
But then that might be all of that information you also want, so you can be better prepared.
Mm.
That's an important point, Steve. Thanks for raising that. We often want to always remind people that people can present only the negatives about their culture, but in some cultures, we present only the positives about our culture. And if you present only one or the other, it's not as helpful because people who don't understand your culture from the outside, from other cultures, they need to know what's the good and the bad. And so we always like to have experts such as yourself who can talk very plainly about both good and bad, because all cultures have both. And if somebody is supposed to work successfully, they have to understand both.
Mm. Sure. Dean, Steve has given us so much that I feel like it's not enough. There's so much that we will want to know from people like Steve. And let's continue this discussion with the quiz respondents. And I hope we'll have enough time not just to answer the quizzes, but ask Steve to expatiate as we engage with our colleagues. And I will mention their names when we come back from 5 minutes break.
Well, before we do that, can I briefly talk on gift, the issue of gift giving?
Why don't you open up with that, Steve, into the second hour? Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to be cut because of we want the podcast to be available for the listeners. Thank you so much. Stay in the studio, Dean and Steve. Colleagues, please don't go away. We will introduce our respondents and we will ask Steve to kickstart that session with the issue of gifting in Nigeria. We'll be back. We will take just 5 minutes. We won't take that long.